But some people say that diplomacy needs to be allowed to do what it's meant to do here. Of course, we have others saying the military option needs to be looked at, I think, with a little bit more gusto than it has in recent months. But there's a big problem with that. In fact, there are a few problems with that, which I want to lay out for you guys, and then you can tell me if you think that the calculus has shifted here, or if this is the same story we've seen over the past, 8 years, essentially, as to whether a strike is coming on the reactors, or we're going to try to talk and make Iran stop. One thing is electoral season, right? What happens if we actually did something militarily against Iran? We've talked before on the show. You could see at a minimum, apart from the possibility of Iranian cells around the world and terrorist attacks, the Strait of Hormuz could be shut down. Let's put up a map of that. What you see here is a choke point area through which somewhere between 20 and 30% of the world's oil reserves on any given day go through there. That really matters. So if that were to be shut down, it could cause major shocks in, of course, the oil market. Even for a relatively short period of time, this could be catastrophic. In fact, we could put up a chart to show you what the estimate would be if even for, there you go, you have the Arab-Israeli war. What you see here are barrels in the millions of oil that were an oil supply shock, meaning taken off the market. Iran-Iraq war, Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. The takeaway here is that all of those kind of pale in comparison to what would happen, it's estimated again, if the Strait of Hormuz was in fact to be shut down. So President Obama certainly doesn't want this on his plate right now. He's got a lot of other things going on. It doesn't seem like that's a likely scenario. Because he doesn't want it on his plate, the Israelis probably don't want to, or I shouldn't say don't want to, are unable to go forward with any kind of military action because they can't count on the U.S. to back them right now. And the U.S. is probably telling them in some capacity, hold off, let's see if these diplomatic talks and sanctions can get going. And from the Iranian perspective, I have to say, they probably think they're doing a pretty good job right now. The sanctions will hurt the people. It's not going to get the regime out of power, though. And I still believe that the Iranian regime thinks that their nuclear program is a matter of self-preservation. So we're going through all these talks. We're having all these chats. We're hoping that we can get them to, I believe the program is stop, ship, and shut. The S3. I just made that up. It's not actually called that. But, I know it was hard. I didn't want to get that one wrong. But they want to stop enrichment to the 20% level, ship out anything that is at the 20% level, and shut down an underground facility at Fordow. That is at the crux of the diplomatic wrangling right now. And here's the fundamental issue, guys. Iran wants nuclear power. We don't want them to have nuclear capability because we can't trust them not to turn it into nuclear missiles. And everything else is kind of noise.
Let me ask you this. If the Iranian regime wants to have nuclear capacity as an act of self-preservation, that's what you just said, right? What could we do to influence this regime not to pursue nuclear capabilities? Is there anything we can do, short of bombs, to convince them not to pursue nuclear capabilities?
The threat of bombs, a credible threat of intervention?
Well, see, now there's a counter-argument that suggests that they would actually pursue nuclear capabilities more under an environment of threat than under an environment of safety.
They can justify it.
Yeah, that if their regime is threatened, regime, not the country, if the regime is threatened, that's a reason to pursue nuclear capabilities. And that, therefore, not just the threat of bombs would push them towards nuclear capability, but sanctions as well, because sanctions threaten regime change.
The idea that punishing the regime or punishing the state is somehow going to make them friendlier to what we want, there's not a great historical precedent for this. And when you look at what's happened recently in the region, we've talked about this here before, Saddam didn't have nukes. Gaddafi gave up any weapons programs that he had. These people have gone bye-bye. And if you look at North Korea, sort of the evil hermit state, they're not going to be touched anytime soon, and it's largely because they carry a very big stick. It's just too painful to get rid of them. So I think the Iranians probably figure if they can get to a point where they actually have, first of all, they do want nuclear power. They don't have the refining capability that they would need to use oil for themselves to the capacity that would supply all their power needs. It's also cleaner if we want to be a little green energy on things. But at the same time, once they get them, what are we going to do? We're going to have sanctions on Iran forever. I think that their perspective is keep it, because once we have it, they'll have to learn to live with it. And Asia wants our oil. So what are we really going to get out of this?
Well, in an interview with the Washington Post with Lally Weymouth, Ehud Barak, Israel's defense minister, he advises that we need to ratchet up sanctions, heighten significantly the demands on Iran's uranium enrichment. And he says because the Iranians are trying to create a zone of immunity where they have so many redundancies in the system that a strategic strike wouldn't even work. So if we increase this type of pressure, then they can't build in these redundancies. So if there is a military action, it's more likely to be effective. And a Guardian columnist writing today had a very contrary point of view, one we haven't discussed on this show, as he argues that Obama's offer of unconditional negotiations has really boxed Iran in, and that Russia and China are now less supportive of Iran, less rock-solid allies, because Obama has shown the world we're willing to negotiate, but the Iranians are not. Do you buy it?
1-2 punch here. Will, go for it.
Well, what I say is I think we need to clarify our purpose with Iran at some point here. I asked the initial question, what can we do, if anything, to stop them from seeking nuclear capabilities? I think I know my answer, and that is nothing. I think this regime wants nuclear capabilities, and there's very little you can do to stop them. So therefore, what do? You aim for regime change. And I think that's what we have been doing and what we are doing and what we will do. We want to get rid of this regime, and that may or may not take bombs.
And who's to say that a regime change would put us in a better situation, though?
Well, I think it couldn't be much worse.
Exactly.
It couldn't be much worse, is a probably fair way to look at it. But if we were in if we were in IR class and we're looking at this as a classic security element, guys, international relations.
Thank you.
They would say this: well, if you're pushing for regime change on the one hand, and you're hoping that diplomatic talks will get you what you want on the other, I think it's much more likely that they probably recognize that we would love a regime change there, and therefore getting the nuclear capability, which they could quickly transition into weapons, which they're probably aware of, means that it's less likely that regime will fall, at least outside military pressure. It could fall internally, of course, but it makes it a lot harder to invade a country if you know that they're going to fire off some nukes at you. The big question is, are they aggressive to the point of self-destruction? That's the question vis-a-vis Israel, and that's what a lot of analysts say. If that's the case, though, we should have gone years ago. It shouldn't have even mattered that we had 2 other wars on the burner. We should have gone in and invaded Iran right away. If people really, truly believe that, it should have been at the top of our national security priority.